so good to have you here today, to be with you across the table from me. Usually you are back there behind me out of this frame, and it's just an honor. Thank you so much.
It's great to be here. Thank you for having me on your podcast, Gabby. This is amazing. I love being able to support it from over there behind the camera, but I also feel it's an honor to be invited on. So.
Well, thank you so much. Before we dive in, I wanted to kind of set the stage a bit, almost set the table out, this table that we have between us for this conversation that we're inviting others into as well. So just as a little background, Grants Pass Remembrance is a truth and reconciliation project on our community's history as a Sundown Town. And so we do racial reconciliation work. And this podcast is a way for us to hear from our neighbors, to hear their stories, to hear their process. It's a way for us to get a better understanding of our community's story and our community's process that we're in. It's a way for us to be curious together, a curiosity about where we've been, a curiosity about where we are today, and a curiosity about where we're going and where we can go. And so it's really exciting to get to be in this space together. Now, Trevor, one of the things that we talked about last week was process, and that's been on my mind so much. And in the coalition with the Grants Pass Remembrance, storytelling has been coming up a lot. And those two words really kind of define for me what this podcast is. It's storytelling because we're hearing the stories from each other, getting a sense of what the story of our community is through our stories as community members. And it's process because, gosh, it's all about process. We're all in process. And I've loved that process piece is what we talked about last week. And as I was thinking about that, there's some elements about process that really embody what this conversation is. It's not about right or wrong. It's not about doing or saying the right thing in the right moment. It's about figuring it out as we go and growing. It's about growth. And that's the piece that I love. And when I think about process, two visuals come to mind. One is a spiral with lots of circles until you get to the center, but still this kind of like this walking towards a center space. But with the spiral, there's so many moments where you hit on moments where you're thinking, I've been here before, I've already done this, and I'm here again. But there's grace there. We do hit so many moments where we've been there before, and we're here again, we're still working on this thing. But at the same time, we're not right where we've been. We are closer into the center. And the other visual that I get is a labyrinth. I don't know if you've ever walked a labyrinth, but like the kind where it's a low wall, you can see the center, you know that's kind of where you're going. But a labyrinth will take you really close into the center, and you're thinking, I'm almost there, I've almost made it. And then it'll swing you right back out to the outside and that feeling of like, oh my gosh, I'm never gonna get there. And I feel like process is sometimes like that. It's something that we can't really compare for each other, where you're at, where I'm at. But we're all in this growth process together, and there's so much we can learn from each other in sharing about our process. And I look forward to that. I look forward to getting a better understanding about our community through your eyes, and inviting those that are joining with us to do the same. So thank you again.
Wow.
For being here.
So one of my takeaways from that is I can say the wrong things today.
Yes.
I can learn from the things that I say.
Yes.
and think something different tomorrow based on what I learned. Mm-hmm. Okay.
One of my freak out moments about process, I love that it's such a treasure to be in process with someone else. And my greatest frustrations about process usually come out around my insecurities around, but I'm going to be frozen in that moment for somebody. Yes. And so that's been a good one for me to sink into with this podcast itself. This podcast is in process, and there's been a lot of process that I've been engaging in, and I can have moments where I just want to like run and hide in a cave.
Yep.
I
Absolutely.
want to be done, but we don't have to be afraid. So
Yeah.
that's a lot of what this conversation is. We don't have
That's
to be
awesome.
afraid.
Yeah. I appreciate that. And I love that whole frame. It gives, again, the opportunity to learn together from each other.
Yeah.
But more importantly, about how we think. And sometimes you can only really know how you think by letting the words come out of your mouth.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
And saying the wrong thing and being able to ponder, wow, where did that come from? What made me think that? Or why do I feel that way? And what's behind that? So
Yeah.
it's awesome.
The words I use for that are noticing and wondering. And that's something that I would invite those of you listening, and I invite myself into that as well. And you too, just the noticing and wondering, noticing what did come up, what did I notice, and what is sticking with me. And I wonder about that. What does that mean? How do I engage in that? And being curious about that.
I like that.
Yeah.
Great.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Trevor. So let's dive in. Now, I know some of the places that we might see you out and about in the community, but I would love to hear you share with us, where might we see you out and about in our community?
Well, so first off, I own The Hive, which is a co-working space and a venue right in the heart of downtown on G Street in between 6th and 7th. And so I'm there most of the time. I'm at The Hive. Matter of fact, we're at The Hive right now. So this is a podcast studio in The Hive.
It's a wonderful space.
And so due to being downtown and being right in the middle of downtown, I am walking all the time. So you might see me walking the streets. You might see me in one of the local restaurants for lunch. You might see me, I sit on some councils and some boards around. And I also own a software development company that is based out of Grants Pass. And so, yeah, I mean, you may also see me in other places. Like I just got back from San Francisco and, I have to travel for work sometimes too. So you might see me coaching my son's soccer team out at the Oregon Football Academy complex, or just watching my other son play soccer because I know enough about soccer to coach the little ones, but I like to leave it as my 11-year-old. He's progressing in his skill set, and so he's moved on to a different level of coaching.
Yes, I can only imagine.
Yeah,
that's really fun to hear. And as a little note of thank you for being out and about in this community. It is a gift.
Yeah.
Now, we've had a lot of conversations on race and racism and equity, but I've never asked you this question in this kind of way. So why does racism matter to you?
Why does racism matter to me? It's interesting. I wish it didn't matter. I wish it wasn't a thing, right? But it's real, and it's a part of our world. It's a part of our life and our interactions. I think part of why it matters to me so much in this community is because, sadly, racism wasn't a big part of my life growing up because there weren't very many races around me when I grew up. Mm-hmm. I grew up in a very, here in the Grants Pass area. Mm-hmm. And there just wasn't a whole lot of different cultures and different skin colors, different, people who looked differently than I did as I was growing up, as I was a child. And so it really, it was less on a daily basis. But then, so like my interaction primarily was through television and through movies and things like that, right? Mm-hmm. And the news, and then yes, as I started going through school, there were people, different skin colors showing up at school, and it was fascinating to me, right? And it's interesting because I believe that we all sort of, sometimes we get exposed to things that we don't want to be exposed to, but oftentimes we get exposed to things based on the people that we associate with as well, right?
Yeah.
And so there was an element where I just didn't run in certain crowds, so I didn't experience some of the negatives. I didn't see the things happening or hear the words coming out of people's mouths because it wasn't the people I spent time with, right? Yeah. But then as I grew up, and really entering into high school is when it really started becoming a thing. And we had one of my best friends I played football with. He was a black boy that was just again, we were great friends, and I didn't understand. Well, first of all, I didn't really even think twice about what his experience might be. Mm-hmm. Right?
Yeah.
Because we were just friends and on the football team and playing sports together and spending a lot of time together. We got really close, and I didn't even, like most of the time, I didn't even stop to think like that he might have a different experience than me, and that kind of, it makes me sad because I think at the time he probably, and again, I'm projecting, but he could have maybe, he could have probably used some friends that were aware, right?
Yeah.
So, and there were less than 5 people of color in my school at the time. I think there was, there was maybe lots of shades of brown, but again, it was a very small percentage of our school population, and it grew over time as I got older. There was, I think more people moving into the area, but in high school is when I was in high school and getting right around graduation, right around my senior year, there was a big movement. Like, so I went to school at North Valley, which is actually out in the county in Merlin.
Yeah.
And there was a big movement to actually locate the headquarters of the West Coast of the KKK in Merlin.
Oh, wow.
And that's again, it was such a bizarre thing because it's the first time that I really experienced it in person. That there really was that it really did exist here, Mm-hmm. And again, there was language and people would joke. There were a lot of racist jokes growing up, right? Apparently benign jokes, and because you grew up in that, whether it was, again, lot like the way you phrase words or how you hold your face or the words you actually say, how you phrase a sentence, right? These are things that were part of jokes just as a normal thing, and again, things that this is something else that I noticed too of those that I went to school with that didn't look like me. They did an incredible job, at least appearing to laugh with you.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And when I think back, again, something else that I reflect on and think how hard that might have been.
Yeah.
And that because of that, it felt, again, benign. It felt like they were in on the joke, right? Mm-hmm. Even though it's about as terrible as it gets, right? When you liking, and so anyways, that was, I think that now I have 2 kids, an 8 and 11-year-old. And, I'm blessed that their experience already is drastically different than my experience. And I want to ensure that or at least be a part of helping to make sure that it is very out in the open, is very understood, and that they have the opportunity to take a position on the topic as opposed to being aloof to it, right? Yeah. Or afraid of it or indifferent to it, right? And I think that's I think that's what's important to me about it. And then in addition to that, because I travel, I do mix a lot, but when I'm home, I miss it. I miss being in a place where there is variety of perspective, variety of taste, variety of culture, being in a place where it doesn't, it feels like it's less about me, right? Yeah. And more about we, like as a group of people. And so I'd love to have an opportunity to participate in helping to foster that in our community here, you know? So.
Yeah. Now, as you've been sharing, it's made me curious about what different resources or things that have helped you in your process of, you talked about some of the people and events that kind of made racism matter to you. Have there been books or resources that you've accessed in your process of growth in that?
Yeah, absolutely. This is another space, though, that I feel a little uncomfortable even talking about. Not in a bad way.
Yeah.
But in a just kind of being on a different side of where I was at one point.
Yeah.
Not in a racist way, but in a I'm not racist way. Right?
Talk more about that, though. Yeah.
So because I was raised in a very inclusive family, a family that just love was at the center of. And there was, it's interesting because I do recall hearing words and again, jokes, a lot of just simple jokes, but jokes nonetheless, that involved racism, and just discrimination all the way around. Right. Growing up in the 80s with the AIDS epidemic, with the DARE,
Yes.
So the war on drugs.
Yeah.
And there was a lot of opportunity for discrimination when I was a kid, right? And it showed in spades. It came out left, right, and center. And as a kid, you kind of just watch it all, and then some people would take what they watched and perform with it, right?
Yeah.
I was more a watcher. I'd try some things on. They usually didn't fit, and it's again, but little things would creep in, and mostly through the subtle little things, impersonations or, things like that. That again, it's like, it didn't feel wrong because I didn't have any ill intent.
Yeah.
Right. But I also wasn't hearing myself from the outside. Right.
Yeah.
Also not knowing what the intent of the person was who was saying it.
Yeah.
Right?
Yes.
So those things matter too.
Yeah.
It's not just whether I meant it when I said it, it's whether somebody maybe perceived that I meant it when I said it or what they thought. I can't control that, while at the same time I have control over what I say.
Yes. Yeah.
Anyways, I guess the thing that became important to me is it wasn't enough to just not be racist, and then also really understanding what it meant to at least not be racist.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then it's incredible how long it took for it to play a larger role in my life, because a lot of the narrative, again, I didn't have moments in time where I looked at a person and felt that they were less than because of the way that they looked. And at the same time, I realized that there were a number of stereotypes that were creeping in from news, from statistics, right? And you can look at those statistics and say, oh, well, this group creates this kind of problem more than anyone else. Or you can look at those same statistics and say, well, this group is targeted more than anyone else. When I learned about, I can't remember what age I was, but when it hit me that numbers are just numbers, they become weaponized when you add context and narration to them, right? Or they're a defense and an argument with context and narrative, right?
Yeah.
And that's and if you want to protect yourself against being a victim of being duped by numbers and statistics, then anytime I hear any numbers or statistics framed a certain way and given to me, I always first assume there's a counter story with those same numbers. And then I want to investigate and look into that so I understand the dynamics. If I'm going to allow those numbers to cause me to feel any way at all, right?
Yeah.
And so that's something that's really important, especially in the, when right now we're throwing a lot of numbers and statistics about very different things.
Yeah.
And just understanding that there, again, in software, we deal with a lot of data science, a lot of data, big sets of data.
Yeah.
And I also have a marketing background. And when you take big sets of data and you mix it with marketing, you end up with stories that are powerful because they're backed up by data. They're backed up by facts, by truth is what it is. These are words that are used, right? And again, really what it is it's anytime you take data and you turn it into a story, that's interpretation. You're framing, you're taking and you're making assumptions to make it make sense.
Yeah.
And so the same exact data point can mean two opposite things depending on how it's framed.
Yeah.
And it's just a number until that. So that's something that I think we all need to keep in mind. And then, as far as like resources go, getting back to that point, I had shown up and not been racist, right?
Yeah.
For as long as I can say. And if I saw something that was a gross injustice, I would stand on the side of defending that. Or I would, I had brave moments. I also had coward moments, right? And really those look like just don't bring attention to me, right? Or I don't want to get involved or, And then I think what's amazing is my eyes were opened through the last couple of years, right? Since George Floyd, Black Lives Matter, it made a difference. It really did. It was like things in education, books, anti-racism, and these different books that were brought into my sphere that I didn't know existed. Different history lessons were produced by huge, Netflix and Amazon were producing these big series and documentary series on sort of this alternate history that I never heard growing up, right? I think that it's been the most powerful time for resources and learning and education since I've been alive, right? the support and money behind it to expose, create awareness, bring attention to, again, amplified beyond any time in my life. For the most part, it could go under the radar for most of my life.
Yeah.
There were moments in time, right? I remember Rodney King when that happened, right? And there was the beginnings of a Black Lives Matter movement at that moment, but it did not get off the ground because it was timing is everything, and power dynamics were different then, and so now we had just a perfect formula for a lot of people's eyes to be able to be opened to the idea that there's more to it than just being a bystander or being a good person in your own eyes, right?
Yeah.
And what does it mean to create safe and inclusive space for other people? That's a proactive action. That's not a passive action.
Yeah.
Right? And just like when someone comes to your front door, you can just imagine if you knocked on someone's door and they just opened the door. They didn't say anything. They just stood there, didn't smile, right? Like, would you feel welcome in that home? Now it's a very different thing if you knocked on the door open and someone's like, hello, oh, hi, come on in. That's a whole different experience.
Yeah.
That's a proactive experience. The other one is a very passive experience.
Yeah.
Like there's, and so.
You could attach a lot of things to.
So much. Yeah.
They don't want me here. They
I'm not
might want
welcome.
you there.
You
but
don't know.
You don't know.
But you also definitely don't feel welcomed.
Welcomed. Yes.
That's welcoming someone is a
Yeah.
proactive action. It's you extending something, right? So anyhow, so through that experience, it was, things were brought to light. I think the most game-changing moment for me was I went through this incredible experience with a man named Matthew Reynolds. He has a consulting company where our company, my business partner at the time and I, we wanted to do something and learn from this experience. And we wanted it to be something that our team had the opportunity to participate in as well. And because this is a sphere of people that outside of my family, I interact with the most. And if I want to have really, intelligent people who are thinkers. And so if I want to go down this path and explore this territory, it's a great group because I spend a lot of time with them and we interact a lot. And I also have the opportunity to create that for them, right? Yeah, with them. And so we hired Matthew to come into our company, and we had no idea what we were going to get. And he came in. He conducted what was called an equity lens workshop. Yeah, and it was a beautiful experience. And we, it was a 3-day workshop with our whole team. It was deep. It was hard. It was harder for some than others because it's hard to face that stuff, right? Yeah. If you haven't spent much time with it, especially if you haven't spent much time with it, it can be really jarring to have it brought to your attention, right? Yeah. And so, he's a very kind man, and very knowledgeable, and he shared his story as a Black man, and as a Black gay man in Southern Oregon, right? And he is just this, again, he has this wonderful balance to him as a human being. There's this like almost a firmness, but all love too. And the firmness is soft. It's weird. It's really hard. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. Like, because when he asks a question, it also, like we're in this space. You've paid me as a consultant to be here, so I expect you to show up too, right? So there's that. That's, I guess, that piece of it. And so there is a little bit of pressure to really like play full out and be a part of it. And for me, the eye-opening piece was really around truly finally, for the first time, not just knowing or hearing about what in the definition of privilege is, but truly it hit home. I got it. My eyes were open to something very different around what privilege means and actually is, and how it shows up differently for everyone in every situation. And then if that becomes something, so that can turn into biases and class, right?
Yeah.
Classism, and also just the way you think, look, and feel about other human beings, right? Based on how you're placed and what your status is, and how they're placed and what their social status is, right?
Yeah.
And that actually shapes and can cloud and color how you think, feel about them. And it shows up all the time. So he was just a wealth of information, still is. He's still a part. Matter of fact, he's doing a workshop here in November. And not here. It's going to be a virtual one, I believe, but fantastic. And then again, through that also, he brought is it Ibram X. Kendi? Anti-racism.
Yeah.
The book. Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's
We'll
not
go
coming
with
to me.
that. It's not coming to me.
But he brought just a bunch of authors I hadn't read before to the table, and then shared with us videos. And by going and following up and watching those videos again, you could see the sources, and then you could go to those sources and find other videos and other information.
Yeah.
And again, it's just, at that time, it was just amazing because it was exploding like popcorn. New books were coming out, new series and videos and movies and things were coming out that just enhanced the education experience, created more opportunities for it. So the last handful of years have just been kind of a roller coaster ride in that, as far as how I feel like, it's like I feel like I keep hitting the reset button on thinking I know things, and realizing that, wow, I'm just scratching the surface here.
Yeah. I had a question on, now I'm putting you on the spot, so if nothing comes to mind, be released. But in terms of your growth process with the awareness of privilege and what that means, is there an example that you could share in which you found yourself in a situation after having taken that course or had that time that you realized, oh, I see how that's at work in this moment, or I see how that's happening here, how that's present, and how that shifted your awareness of a situation? Does that question make sense?
Yes.
Okay.
It definitely makes sense. And for the most part, they're embarrassing moments.
I hear you. Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Where I'm like, what? I not only thought that, but I said that out loud. And then what's beautiful, I think, though, is there's a new awareness. There's like an internal Jiminy Cricket, if you will, right? That's right there. That when the words come out of my mouth, it's like a little tug, like, hey. And then you think about it. I get this instant reflection, and then I ponder it, and then I think, and then later I'll come back to that. It happened to me recently, actually, and again, it wasn't. I think it happens with not just racism, classism, and different. And again, I see it. I see people struggling with it constantly. And it happened. So my team was meeting, and someone was basically, just a long story short, we were talking about habits and having morning routines. And one of my team members said that, she's like working on it. And she, because, she's kind of tired of just like waking up, rolling out of bed and heading right down to Starbucks and starting to work. Right. And so I made this little joke out of the side of my mouth, which was like, she's like, I don't even know what they think of me, right? And I was like, yeah, they're like, who's the little homeless girl on the corner? And I said the words, and instantly I was like, I felt gross, right? I felt icky for having said that because it was just a little joke. She wasn't offended by it at all, right?
Yeah.
So I think we were all kind of oblivious in that moment about what really took place in that moment.
Yeah.
And then I got kind of quiet, and the conversation continued on. And and this is the part that I think has changed. It was awkward, but I paused the conversation a few minutes later, and I shared my experience. And I think that is what we need to do when we have those aha moments.
Yeah.
I shared the experience of, I said this thing, it was a joke. And the fact that I said that, I likened you to another human as a joke. Like, there's something about that that's funny if you were in that position. Like that, I just compared the two and made you more valuable than them. And in addition to that, I used a label. There was all kinds of things wrong with this, so let's dissect it. And it was a little bit like, again, awkward at first, but it settled right into itself. It turned into a very healthy conversation, right? And I think that there were other people that stepped up and said, like, wow. I mean, in the moment, I just kind of chuckled and it rolled off my back. I didn't even think 2 seconds about it, right?
Yeah.
And so I think that's the piece of it, is us realizing what was great was the words came out. Something in me was aware that this is, that a moment just happened.
Yeah.
And then I was trying to reconcile. I kind of like dropped out of the conversation for a minute because I was trying to understand what just happened.
Yeah.
And do I think that? And because I had this moment where my heart felt differently than my biases.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And my heart went to a place where I needed to correct this for myself.
Yeah.
And if I wanted to be brave, I needed to share that with other people, with them, the people who witnessed it and experienced it, because I also don't know if anybody else had a negative experience that I created for them in that moment, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Because there are some very sensitive people in the group, people who are sensitive to things like that, and they may not call me out in front of everyone. I'm their boss too,
Yeah.
So
There's a power dynamic.
So the power dynamics at play, and so anyway, so that moment though, I also through that moment got to model for the team how we as a company think and react in moments like that.
Yeah.
And it's with grace. I had grace for myself. I asked for grace from everybody else. Yes. I said, hey, can we learn from this? I'm learning from this. And I'm actually curious. I'd love to hear from you and talk a little bit about it, unpack it a little bit so we can all see what just happened there.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that's the stuff I think is that's drastically different for me now. Is I feel empowered to see and understand my own biases like I never have before.
Yeah.
Through an awareness that has been brought to me by others.
Yes. Yeah.
And then that bravery, when I hear their stories about how their life has been, experiences that they've had inflicted upon them. And when you hear those stories from a bunch of people, different people who've experienced different types of discrimination, that's a good source of courage for speaking up when you participate on accident.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So,
which happens a lot, I think. Trever, thank you so much for sharing, for being vulnerable in that way. There's vulnerable spaces I've come to refer as sacred spaces because there's spaces where they're hard to share, but we all share in them. And getting to hear your process of that is something that I think I'll probably keep carrying with me. I struggle with language. I say you guys a lot, and it has been more than a year of me working out that language, and I now in the moment can catch myself. I don't know if it's every time, but just it's so there that invitation of we can be in process together, and we can expose some of this process because it's good. It's good to be in process together. And how do we work these things out that are habits or that are just there for whatever reasons they're there, but we're realizing this doesn't lead to full life. This doesn't lead to connection and to flourishing for all of us. And so thank you so much for sharing those details and that process.
Sure.
Thank you. I would love to, you touched a little bit on this earlier, but I'd love to hear more specifically if you've, now I'm going to ask you a question, but I'm going to preface it. If you've heard any stories about Grants Pass's history as a sundown town. Now, my own experience in talking with people over the last many years is that people that are new in town tend to have a moment pretty close to when they've arrived in town that somebody tells them about this history that Grants Pass has. Now, Sundown Town isn't a term that's usually used. It's usually a reference to the sign that was on the curfew sign that was on the bridge or something like that. The KKK or some reference. But I've also had some dear friends and people that I know that have grown up here, some of them that are like, oh yeah, of course that's happened. And some of them that have never heard of it, had never heard of it before. And I'm curious what your experience was in understanding Grants Pass's history with racism.
Yeah. That's a good question. So I feel like it's hard to go back and think what I thought before or remember what it was like before I know what I know, right?
Yeah, yeah.
And I will say that before this work began, I was aware of what Sundown Towns was, like the term and what it was and what it represented.
Yeah.
I think I just assumed this was one at one point in time.
Huh. Yeah.
Because of my experience here and just what I know, and the fact that the KKK felt so comfortable trying to put a stake in the ground that there's a pretty and the lack of color in our demograph here, the lack of diversity in general. I just assumed that. I had heard stories about signs that were on the courthouse and and about references around restrooms and a lot of segregation stuff.
Okay.
Right?
Yeah.
And so I don't know that I was aware that there was a sign on the bridge that was a sundown, indicator. But, and again, I was born and raised here. I moved away a couple of times and I moved back one more time, then I moved away. And I love this. I do love it here.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. And that's why, people, whenever there's a lot about this area when it comes to the mindset of, I would just say a majority, because that's easy when we get into whether it's voting or other things. Numbers indicate that I am not in the majority in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
And it's interesting being a native here, or at least born here.
Yeah.
And having spent most of my life here over the last, 4, 5, 6 years, feeling unwelcomed myself in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
And feeling that polarization and feeling that, because I think a lot of people move here because they came and had an experience here. And it usually revolves around people, right? Welcoming, nice people, kind people, people who aren't afraid to say hello, those types of things. And so to see this other side and really experience this other side, meaning, I don't mean like different people, I mean just when that part of us comes out with each other, it has felt different, right? And there are other areas that through that same time maybe felt a little bit more aligned with how I think and feel about things. And So there's questions like, why don't you just move? Right? Why don't you just go somewhere that is more diverse, that is more welcoming, that is, because there are places that are more than where we currently live, right? And when that was presented to me, I think, I've kind of always had the same response to any question like that. Like, because I've started multiple businesses here that you probably in your right mind wouldn't start in a small town like this. A software consulting company based in Southern Oregon is a tough thing to pull off, right? But a co-working space in a town that's as small as ours is tough to pull off. So when it came to this, it was like, well, I don't actually, I like it here. I love it here, and my family's here. I would love to play a role in helping this place be more inclusive, be more welcoming, and be a place that I want to live all the way around. Not just parts of me want to live here, but my whole being wants to live here. And it's not just because everything is the way that I like it or everybody thinks the way that I think, but being a part of things like the project that you're helping spearhead here. That is the stuff that I want to be a part of and celebrate, and the positive, because I think what do they say? You can't smile and be mad at the same time, right? You can't have right?
Yeah.
It's just your brain isn't wired to have a genuine smile and be mad at the same time. Those two things don't, reconcile, right?
Yeah.
So I think that if we can focus more of our time smiling with each other and doing this work from a place of love, that there's less room in each of us to feel the other things.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
We're creating less of an opportunity. And I'm not saying, and again, this is what's really important. And I think you're someone who is really great at this, I think, a great model of this. And that is, we're told that people aren't their actions, right?
Yeah.
And we oftentimes, when we use names, when we call people names, we give a label to somebody like they are the thing that they've done.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And so, but then in that moment, they did that thing. But that doesn't necessarily mean that's who they are.
Yes.
That's what they did, right?
Yeah.
And this is like parenting 101, how we talk to our kids and how we teach our kids to talk. But then as adults, we do it to each other all the time by labeling each other and bucketizing each other into things that are easy to point at and describe, right? And by doing that, we are removing the opportunity for us to have a real conversation, for us to be anything else to each other.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So.
There's some things that I noticed in your sharing that makes me think of, we talk about the broken and the beautiful with the Grants Pass Coalition. That's a term that's come up a lot. Just this piece of, there are hard things about our community and we love our community. And this piece of the broken and the beautiful is often when we talk about our history. Like, there are broken pieces there and there's beautiful pieces there. Like, all of this is here together, and it can all exist in this space. And how do we build on that beautiful? How do we build on that? How do we grow in that thing, those things that we love? How do we let that take up more space and more space?
Right.
And the other piece that struck me in your sharing was there seems to be, now tell me if I'm saying this right, there seems to be in our community a difficulty with knowing how to be present with difference. And I wonder if that is kind of rooted in, we do have a space where there has been a lot of the same that we have celebrated that we're the same. And as we have gotten different, as you discovered that you were different than the majority and how that felt unwelcome, that piece of, I think there's some growing in how do we be present with difference? How do we embrace that and not be afraid of that? And what does that mean and look like as a community?
Yeah. So that's beautiful. And I think my opinion is that, and I fall prey to this all the time, right? I think it's an easy trap to fall into, which is that trap of seeing someone through a lens that was painted, right? And then having a real hard time seeing that person any other way than through the lens that you created at one moment in time about that person.
As in meeting a person and not actually being present to the person as they are giving themselves to you, but meeting a person and saying, "Oh, you're all of these things. I already know you."
Yeah.
kind
So
of thing.
there's that, I guess that sort of pre-framing of people that's based on your understanding of who they are and what they're about.
Yeah.
And then there's a moment in time you might have experienced with that person
Yeah.
that can paint it in a different way, right? And so I think that one of the things that we're experiencing kind of ubiquitously in our culture here in the United States is when you're identified a certain way, you get thrown into a bucket and you're the enemy.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's, that's something that we really, really, really need to overcome. It's one thing to identify yourself as something, right? It's a whole other thing for someone else to force you into that bucket for the rest of your life.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And also, I think it's okay that we think differently.
Yeah.
This is hard. It's really hard. It's hard for all of us to run up against things that people believe that are different than what I believe. And in the hardest times when they're completely in conflict with each other, with what I believe is in total conflict of what you believe.
Yeah.
And when we run into those things, it's hard, very hard to reconcile.
Yeah. Yeah.
And we get to deal with some really big versions of that all the time right now. It's part of our, it's just ever present because of the way that information travels these days.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So back in the day, you would have to get a newspaper once a day to even know what was going on in the world or anywhere, right? Even outside of your house, because it was so rural at the time. Like if you didn't get a paper or hear on the radio, something, and that's what you knew about what was going on, that one little stream. Now think about it, like every single day we're inundated with thousands of those from different angles, right?
Yeah.
So it's a wholly different thing that we deal with now. But I think being curious is I think the magic. It's a good starting place, at least.
Yeah.
It's a place where you can discover a lot about yourself. It's a place where you can learn a lot about other people. And when I enter a conversation with someone that on the surface I disagree with, it's really interesting to, I think one of the most fundamentally important things in that moment is to realize that I don't agree with you on this thing. And we need to find some common ground
Yeah.
with each other.
Yeah.
Something that we align around, that we can agree on, that we can see something different in each other.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
That we can have some common rapport with each other. Right? And that is the beginning of what is a form of love and compassion, right? I think that opens the door for us to see each other separate from the issue and allow us to talk about the issue. And if you care about someone, you are also curious what makes them think the things that they think. And so listening and asking questions and trying to understand how they end up where they end up, you can learn a lot. And sometimes I've found that there are topics that I've moved on, and if nothing else, I'm like, it makes so much more sense to me, even if I don't agree with it still, or if it's not aligned with how I believe or feel or think. It makes so much more sense to me, and it's created this whole other opportunity with this person, right? So I think also, and this is something I struggle with, and so I'll say one of those things that I'll probably want to revise in some future time.
Well, thank you.
I think that there's a lot right now. There's a lot of, when it comes to the, I think I heard in a term used in the last interview you did, which was tribalism.
Yeah.
And community. I think those were juxtaposed with each other.
Yeah.
I think, community is a beautiful thing, and it's a thing that allows us to coexist and be a part of something together, right?
Yeah.
Tribalism, I think, is actually a beautiful thing until it's challenged. And how do you respond when the thing that... So tribalism is basically me and others think a certain way, have certain opinions on a topic. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. Matter of fact, that allows us to be close with each other and share things with each other. I think it's when tribes collide, what we do with that and how we respond to that, that's where it can get, we've seen it get really ugly.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so in my mind, though, is there a different way? And I think that, there are examples of colliding tribes who actually leverage each other's strengths.
Yeah. I would say that's a form of community.
Yeah.
There's this working together, this awareness of, I am this way, and I know that you're different and you're this way, but there are ways in which we can work together and be together.
Sure.
That are beautiful.
Right.
That we don't have to, we're not threatened by each other. We don't have to be afraid of our differences.
Yes. And so are you thinking that again, I just think that putting tribe
putting those
into
as
a negative bucket, I don't know. I struggle with that. I don't know if I agree with that. I think that it can show up. The worst side of it can show up when we defend our tribe.
Yeah.
Right? What happens is we get deep rooted in this thing that we collectively share.
Yeah.
And there's no room for anything else, or we're going to fight against everything else that isn't that thing. That's where it is, that's where it takes on a negative.
Yeah.
While at the same time, you look around, we have tribes all around us all the time.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Church is a form of tribe.
Yeah.
Like it's not just community, because the difference really is that we share common beliefs about things.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
That's like...
No, I like hearing you.
Yeah.
Like, I really like the perspective that I'm getting and learning from you as you share that. I think one of the things that I think of tribes and tribalism in the same way that I think of race and racism, or class and classism. Like I think of it as that tweaked version that you were describing. So I think I just have kind of a different definition, but I loved hearing it fleshed out when you talked about it, because it shifted some of my own thinking on that, the interaction between tribes and the gift of that, the gift of those spaces, and how can we keep those spaces continuing to be gifts and flourishing, instead of a turning in on themselves in a way that also turns them away from others, and that's hurtful both to the others and to themselves.
Absolutely. I think in the tribes that we participate in,
Yeah.
I think that it might be important, and this is a role that we can all opt into.
Yeah.
And that is in the tribes that we're in, to work hard with our tribes to focus on the positive pieces in our tribe, like the things that bond us that are around compassion and love, and as opposed to being bonded by pain and by frustration and by anger, right? When those are our bonds,
Interesting.
when that's how our tribe is formed,
Yeah.
it has a very different purpose.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So I don't know, just a thought.
I like that. I could talk to you for so much longer, and I don't feel like, but it's fun too. Like the questions that I had for you, it came out in different pieces. What would a sunrise town look like to you? I mean, you talked about welcome and that the difference between opening a door and having nothing, like a no response kind of thing, and the difference between a smile and a welcome, and that no response might mean, oh, we're glad that you're here, but if there's nothing put into that, it could be interpreted in a lot of different ways.
Well, and take it a step further.
That. Yeah.
Put a sign out in your yard.
Yeah.
Take it a step further.
Welcome.
Yeah, exactly. Right.
Yeah.
I think that welcome. So, like, we can be very creative around where that welcome can be taken and extended.
Yeah.
Where that opening up can be taken and extended. And that's the work you're doing with this project, right? You're taking a topic that I think that it's obviously struck a chord, because there's so many people who are coming out saying, how can I be a part? How can I participate? I want to show up. I need to learn how to show up better.
Yeah.
This is what I want for my community. I think that's a big piece is, a lot of the work that I do is around creating experiences.
Yeah.
And being an experience designer, if you will, right? And so in that, one of the things that I often preach is there's the basic concept that comes to mind. And then there's even the framework in which your world exists in. So for instance, that house example.
Yeah.
When I ask somebody, how can you be more welcoming when someone comes to your door? Oftentimes they'll just think inside of the box, their house. It's like, I'd say hello and welcome. I'd invite them in.
Yeah.
I'd put something on the wall that was familiar. I would, I might have baked something in the background so it smells welcoming. You know what I mean? Like, I might put the dog in the back room if they're aggressive, whatever it is. Like, that's where their mind goes. And then the question is, okay, well, how can you make someone feel welcome to your house if they're not coming over?
Yeah.
And then you get them to think outside of that box that oftentimes we frame an experience based on our interaction and what we've experienced in that before, rather than thinking, how can I go beyond that? How can I, and that's where new, different, innovative things come from.
Yeah. So this whole conversation, it's just so easy for me to reference back to the work that we're doing with Grants Pass Remembrance. And that's one of the things I'm so excited about in this conversation as we engage more community members and ask these questions and are curious together and are noticing our stories and wondering about it. I can't wait to see what kind of creative ideas will come up in regards to, and I've heard some really, the Sunrise community is one that came up from somebody as we were having these conversations, like, let's become a Sunrise community. Like, well, yes, that would be the opposite of a Sundown Town. And what would that look like? And maybe we can do something with our bears, or maybe we have such beautiful murals in this space. Like maybe there's any, just I don't know what it will look like for Grants Pass to lean into what does it look like for us to be welcoming. But I can't wait to see what comes up, because it's exciting. It's exciting to see from when we all get together, the things that pop, that create, there's a magic there, a creativity of what does it look like for us to say welcome? It will be different than another Sundown Town that's going through a similar process at some point in time. They'll say welcome in a different kind of way. What will it look like for us to say welcome? And I just, those pieces excite me, that we will have our own particular way that will be unique and beautiful in our own kind of manner. But I have a quote that I wanted to share kind of as a little ending. But Trever, thank you so much.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you so much. It's just been an honor.
I think, it's been an honor for me. And also, I appreciate you inviting my voice to the table. I felt a lot like at this moment in time, it's not my time to talk, right? And that I've worked really hard to put my focus on creating space and opportunities for other people to talk and have a voice. And I've been really intentional about sitting in the back and just empowering and being present and creating space. And I do have a lot of thoughts, and I have learned my own path of learning. And so I appreciate the opportunity to share that. And then I'm going to go back to my other position of just helping create space and supporting, because there's so many voices we need to hear from that have perspectives we all need to hear, and have stories that are so important for us to understand and internalize, and will help take us to that next chapter, that next place we want to go. Yeah. I think as a community.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. I really look forward to getting to hear even more the voices of our neighbors of color and leaning in. I've had some recent experiences lately of getting to lean in more, and it's just such an honor to see things from a different perspective. And it's clarifying in a lot of neat ways.
Yes.
I look forward to that growing. And while we're in this moment, thank you so much for the encouragement and empowerment that you've been in my own process, in my own life. So thank you. That's
absolutely.
It's a gift to our community, not because I'm able to do it, but because you're willing to use your space.
Yes.
And your power in a way that is empowering of others. And
I appreciate that.
You.
Well, gender is another topic. And creating space for powerful women like yourself to help lead community movements, I think, is important as well. And I have a very strong wife who I've learned so much from. She's quiet and she doesn't like to be out in front talking, but she is absolutely a leader, and she is absolutely has a massive impact. And I've learned so much through her. And so that's another piece of this for me as well in this experience, is because you like to put yourself in the background, but it's important for you also to be a member of this and helping lead it, because that's truly who you are. That's what you are to this project. Without you, we wouldn't be doing this project here in Grants Pass right now, right? That's beautiful. That's amazing. So thank you for what you're doing for us as a community and helping truly change this community that I grew up in and love so much, and turning it into a place that is so much more loving and welcoming.
Yes. Oh gosh. I'm honored to get to be in process with so many. It's a joy. This is a joy. Now I'm going to read this quote, and some of it might, for those of you who are listening, some of it might feel like it's kind of new. It didn't come up. Some of it might reference back to things that we've talked about. But yeah, we'll just go ahead and read it and enjoy your noticing. Whatever it is that you noticed from this time, sit in it, be curious about it, wonder about it, invite a friend into it. And yeah, I'm excited for you too. Now, this was put together by Anne, a woman who's on our coalition, and it speaks of many of the conversations that we've had over the last year. So it's very representative of what Grants Pass Remembrance is about. So here it is. We are not looking for who to blame or to assign new blame. We are instead extending an invitation to join together in moving into a future for Grants Pass that is no longer one focused on keeping Grants Pass a white man's town, but instead focused on making sure that all who live here can call this place my town with pride and joy. We seek to change our reputation among people of color and speak words and actions that become louder than the words that once hung over our bridge and continue to hang over our town. Thank you, Trevor.
Thank you, Gabby.